What if World War III broke out today? A chilling question indeed, but have we ever stopped to consider the consequences? Imagine the unthinkable, a new global conflict, World War III erupting in the very cradle of civilization, the Middle East, the flashpoint, the historic and contentious lands of Israel and Palestine. Two nations steeped in a history of discord, whose struggles could potentially ignite a flame that engulfs the world. This is not a scenario pulled from the pages of a dystopian novel, but a hypothetical situation based on the very real and complex geopolitical tensions that have defined this region for decades. Israel and Palestine, two entities locked in a bitter struggle, their disputes rooted in deep-seated historical, religious and political issues. Consider the recent flare-ups and the escalating tensions. It's not hard to imagine how a single spark, an incident or a miscalculation could spiral out of control, drawing in regional powers and their respective allies, and setting off a chain reaction of conflict that stretches across the globe. The Middle East, a region of strategic importance, is not just a focal point for local powers, but a chessboard for global superpowers. The United States, Russia, China, and European nations all have vested interests in the region, and any conflict involving Israel and Palestine could potentially pull them into a wider confrontation. But what does this mean for the world? A third world war, a conflict on a global scale, is a scenario that would reshape our world in ways that are hard to fathom. It would not only lead to widespread devastation and loss of life, but also change the geopolitical landscape, disrupt global economies, and affect every aspect of our daily lives. As we delve deeper into this hypothetical scenario, remember our aim is not to incite fear, but to understand the magnitude of such an event. What would a World War III sparked in the Middle East mean for us and for future generations? These are questions we must contemplate, not out of morbid curiosity, but as a stark reminder of the importance of peace and diplomacy in our world. In the event of a third world war, no nation would remain an island. The world as we know it would change. Let's delve deeper into the concept of the domino effect, which in this context refers to the cascade of international involvement that would inevitably follow the outbreak of a global war. This effect is propelled by a complex web of alliances, political pressure, and economic interests that bind nations together. Imagine a giant chessboard with each piece representing a country. The game begins in the Middle East, with Israel and Palestine at the epicenter. As the conflict escalates, the chess pieces start to move, drawn into the fray by a myriad of reasons. Major powers like the United States, Russia, and China would find themselves in a precarious position. Their global influence, military capabilities, and vested interests in the region would compel them to act. But how? The United States, for instance, has long-standing alliances and commitments in the Middle East. It's not just about maintaining geopolitical balance, it's also about safeguarding economic interests. Oil, after all, is the lifeblood of modern economies. Russia, on the other hand, has its own chess pieces to maneuver. Its historical ties and strategic alliances with certain Middle Eastern countries would inevitably draw it into the conflict. Not to mention, the potential for expanding its sphere of influence would be a tantalizing proposition. Meanwhile, the dragon, China, might initially prefer to watch from the sidelines. But even as an observer, the ripples of the conflict could disturb its economic waters. As the world's largest importer of oil, any disruption to the oil supply could send shockwaves through its economy. A passive stance might not remain an option for long. As these superpowers make their moves, other countries, bound by their own alliances and interests, would be drawn into the conflict, each contributing to a chain reaction of global proportions. The fallout would be global, affecting not just the warring nations, but the entire world. The role of superpowers in any global conflict cannot be understated. Their actions could either de-escalate or exacerbate the situation. Let's start with the United States, a country that has historically held strong alliances with Israel. The US, as one of the most influential superpowers, would likely be pulled into the conflict. The strategies employed would likely involve a combination of diplomatic pressure and military intervention. However, the impact of this involvement could be twofold. On one hand, it could help to de-escalate the situation, but on the other, it could escalate tensions with other global powers. Speaking of which, let's consider China and Russia, Two other superpowers with vested interests in the Middle East. China, with its Belt and Road Initiative, has significant economic ties in the region. Russia, on the other hand, has historically supported Palestine. Both countries might see an escalated conflict as an opportunity to extend their influence in the region. Their strategies could vary significantly. China, with its growing economic power, might opt for economic coercion, using its investments and trade relations as leverage. Russia, with its established military prowess, might choose a more direct approach, potentially providing military support to Palestine. The alliances formed in this conflict could have far-reaching consequences. The United States, allied with Israel against China and Russia, supporting Palestine, could polarize the global community, leading to an even larger, more dangerous conflict. The consequences of these superpowers getting involved are immense. The balance of power could shift dramatically, leading to a new world order. The economic impact, with potential trade wars and sanctions, could plunge the world into a deep recession. The human cost, in terms of lives lost and displaced people, could be devastating. The actions of these superpowers could shape the course of the hypothetical conflict and, in turn, the future of our world. The stakes are high, the potential repercussions severe. It's a grim reminder of the importance of diplomacy and the need for peaceful resolutions to conflicts. In the aftermath of such a catastrophic event, what would our world look like? The echoes of a Third World War would resonate far beyond the immediate conflict zones. With superpowers drawn into the fray, the global economy would likely teeter on the brink of collapse. Trade routes disrupted, stock markets plummeting, currencies depreciating. These are just a few of the economic aftershocks we could expect. Industries across the board would suffer, pushing unemployment rates to staggering heights. The world could find itself spiraling into a deep and prolonged recession, perhaps even a depression, the likes of which haven't been seen since the early 20th century. But the fallout wouldn't just be economic. A humanitarian crisis of epic proportions would ensue. In the war-torn regions, infrastructure would lie in ruins, basic services would be non-existent, and millions of people would be displaced. The world would witness a surge in refugees, fleeing from the horrors of war. Seeking safety and a chance at life, the strain on already resource-stretched nations would be immense, potentially leading to a ripple effect of socio-political crises around the globe. Geopolitical shifts would be inevitable. The balance of power could radically change, with new alliances formed and old ones shattered. Countries would scramble to rebuild, to regroup, to redefine their place in a world forever scarred by the devastating effects of war. In the face of such potential destruction, the importance of diplomacy and peacekeeping cannot be understated. The world's leaders must strive to resolve conflicts through dialogue, negotiation, and mutual understanding. The United Nations, regional bodies, and other international institutions need to play an active role in preventing such a catastrophic scenario from unfolding. We must remember war is not a solution, but a harbinger of devastation. Our focus should always be on fostering peace and understanding, for it is only through peace that we can hope to build a future that is secure, prosperous, and just for all.